For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Pat Mack, Northumberland County Planning Director, and it's a pleasure to have you all here tonight to review what this is as the final meeting for the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure area. This project was something that was introduced to me the day one on the job a little over a year and a half ago, and I'm thrilled to see it finally come to this point. Without a lot of help, we wouldn't be at this point here today. We've had a lot of input from a lot of folks, state agencies, state representatives, our commissioners, a great steering committee, and more importantly, some of the county employees, as in my planning department staff. I've been very thrilled to work with Kathy Jeremiah on this project. She's really been the person on the ground doing a lot of the work, as I call it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And she should be owed a great debt of gratitude for the amount of work she put in to this project. Whether you agree or disagree, she did with the concept. She really did put her heart and soul into this, and that can be appreciated. That said, I want to get started here. I have the folks from Pashigan Associates in conjunction with Pannoni. They've done the planning for this project, as many others. And the slide that shows above is our steering committee. I'll go down them quickly. Representative Kurt Mosser, Kathy Jeremiah, myself, Mr. Jeff Nye, Mr. Joe Piccarelli, Mr. Dave Crow, Mr. Howard Hetzendorf, Mr. Steve Minker, Mr. Bill Rosini Jr., Bernie Rumberger Jr., Gene Welsh, Jim Backus, Lance Swartz, Louise Mensch, Tom Hetzendorf, and Barry Yarworth. Those people should be recognized for the time they've spent on that as well, for what they've done. That said, when we leave here tonight, we will still be in what we call a public comment period. A website has been generated to allow folks who may have further comment or suggestion, idea, pretty much anything to get in touch with us. You can go to anthraciteadventure.com. On that website, there's a very easy contact page. You can download the plan. You can keep in touch with us. To get started with the program, we started this project quite a while back, and we were looking at options that we had for this property. One thing that I think that many of us can agree on is the status quo on this property in many ways is not acceptable. There are many activities that I know, whether you support this idea or not, we all agree with. I think the main issue of that is the dumping. I don't think I've seen anyone on any forum or anything say they agree with dumping on this property. We feel that this project will create a presence on this property to alleviate the dumping. It may not eliminate it from day one, but it will give us an opportunity to have a presence, to get a physical presence on this property to stop the dumping. There are many people in this room who have dedicated a lot of time and effort into cleaning up these dump sites, only a week or two later to see a mess again. It's not right, it shouldn't be done, and we feel this project will help mitigate that. And some of the other pictures, as you can see, these were issues that were brought up to us throughout the process. The issues were of open burning, fires left unattended, you name it, it's been happening out there. I would say that 5% of the population is doing that and ruining for the other 95% that is not. That said, the presence of that 5% is left there every day when you go out on that property. In looking at our options, we came up with 4 basic options. The first one was a simple resolution to the problem, and that is higher security. We all know the vastness of this property and what it would take to have a security force. It would probably cost the county somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 a year, and it is not sustainable. We all know the kind of budget times we are in, and certainly for the county to add a security staff to patrol this property would not be reasonable. The second option for the property would be to sell it. It would mean a one-time cash influx for the county. It would likely mean pennies on the dollar of the revenue that could be generated from the mineral interest on the property. It shows no promise of any development and no promise of anyone allowed to have access in the future. We didn't feel that was feasible because we wanted to give the residents an opportunity to use the property as they have. That said, selling the property gives us no guarantee of it. The third option would be to sell it publicly to Game Lands, Game Commission, or any other public entity who would be interested. Again, that would mean pennies on the dollar what the property was worth. We would be giving up the coal, mineral interests, which would not be feasible, and it would not make economic sense for the county to do that. Furthermore, we're not sure that any state agency would be able to provide the necessary funding to purchase a vast piece of property like this. But again, at the end of the day, it doesn't guarantee full user interest to the property. That is something that was our goal from the start, was to get users to use this property both in the county and out. This project has been based on economic development and getting new users into the property, and that's been our theme throughout the entire course of this planning project. The fourth option was to formalize it, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. To create a formal management entity to manage the property, the users that are on it, to mitigate the hazards, create a presence, reduce the county's liability, increase the attractiveness to the user base, and we hope eliminate the financial burden on the county. I say we hope, as this presentation here tonight is a recommendation. We need to follow through on it, we need to stick to the plan, and we need to get this thing funded. If we're able to do that, the projections show that we're able to bring a very sizable influx of cash to this area. New cash, new users, tourism, etc. In this fourth option, we felt also economic development, as our most important issue, could be covered. This would give the county residents an opportunity to still use the property as they have today, as well as clean it up, get rid of the environmental hazards, and get rid of the issues. That said, I'm going to turn it over to our friends at Pashik Associates. We can't thank them enough for the job they have done and the help they've provided us. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. What we'd like to do is we have about a 45 minute presentation of the recommendations, draft recommendations that are contained in the plan. As Pat said, it's still open for public comment. We'll take public comment and have a question and answer session at the end of the meeting tonight. But you can also submit your comments via email or written comments to the county planning department as well. In terms of our agenda, we're going to talk first about the overall physical improvements that we are recommending for the property. We'll discuss the phase 1 development. Bob Good will present the business plan. We'll present the projected economic impact. What will the Anthracite outdoor adventure area mean to Northumberland County from an economic perspective? And then we'll have the questions and answers. First of all, we are assuming, because you're here, you know what is being proposed for the Anthracite outdoor adventure area. But some of you may not. And what it is preserving responsible recreation for all. As Pat said, if the other options that were presented to the county were taken, there's no guarantee that the future use of the land will be preserved for you to go out and recreate on the property like you do today. It also provides mechanisms for being good stewards of the land, conserving the sensitive natural resources. We've worked very diligently throughout the planning process to work with the resources, the natural resources, the sensitive resources, instead of over top of those resources. The improvements that are being proposed for the property are being recommended, we recommend they be done in a sustainable manner, sustainable trail design all the way up through sustainable facility design. Being a good neighbor, currently there are a lot of impacts, negative impacts to surrounding neighbors that surround the property and the different access points. And so we want to alleviate and reduce the impact to the community and the community resources. We want to preserve the region's coal heritage. Really, this Anthracite outdoor adventure area has the opportunity to showcase the heritage of the Anthracite region at the national level, to sell ourselves, make this someplace special where people want to come visit this as a destination, not only for the recreation opportunities, but to learn about the heritage that they may have going back in their family as related to the anthracite activities of the region. The economic development opportunities are tremendous, providing the goods and services desired by the folks that will come to visit the area. And then opportunities for all, from beginners to experts, from families to the hardcore enthusiasts. But really, the plan is developed to meet the needs of everyone. In terms of the process, we had an extensive opportunity for public input. This is the third public meeting that we've had. We've had a number of steering committee meetings. We've met with the steering committee that Pat reviewed with you. They were our sounding board. They were our guide. There were a lot of issues that were debated. It started off, there wasn't consensus among the group. We had very diverse interests on the steering committee, and through the process, we were able to bring everyone together and create what we would feel was really a win-win scenario for everybody involved and all the user groups that were represented. We met with local businesses. We met with the first responders. We met with the existing OHV facilities throughout the area. We've spoken with the environmental and conservation interests. Eric Miller from the Pennsylvania Game Commission came out and walked the site with Pat to talk about the various habitat areas that they were interested in seeing, and how the facility development might impact those or not. We had non-motorized interests on the steering committee. We met with the economic development and tourist promotion interests of the region, as well as the off-highway vehicle interests and businesses. A tremendous amount of information. The first public meeting generated, I believe it was 30-plus pages of comments on the cards that were completed. We had, I think, about a dozen pages from the second public meeting. And that input, I have to tell you, was taken to heart. Those comments were read, they were considered, they were evaluated collectively by our consulting team, by our steering committee, and we reflected upon it. And again, we feel that we are responding with a plan that responds to the public's desires. In terms of the overall physical improvements to the property, we've talked about the respect for the environment and the resources that we have there. The identification and warning of hazards. There are many hazards that are out there. As you're riding out there today, those aren't marked, you're not aware of those, they're not signed. Those are accidents waiting to happen. Those are liability to the county, who's the owner of the property. And so through the master planning process and the development process of the property, those areas will be noted, they'll be signed, there'll be warnings to let you know that there are hazards coming up and to be aware of those as you're traveling throughout the property. Again, the respect for the surrounding neighbors, access for safety and security personnel and emergency responders. The master plan has a number of landing zones. Those landing zones are a result of our meetings with the first responders to talk about their ideal scenario for accessing the site and people who may have an accident on the property. And so the goal was to provide access to be within roughly about 1,000 to 1,500 feet of any of the landing zones that have been identified in the master plan. And finally, the history and heritage of the Anthracite region. Through the master planning process, we've talked about that by referring to various areas of the site based on the historical terminology from the Anthracite region, some of the place names that have been, that are no longer there today, but we can refer to those areas of the site to recall that heritage that we have. So what I've done is I've taken the maps that you see on the wall that you had a chance to look at before the meeting started, and I've divided them up into several sections. The first section begins at the proposed entrance and trailhead, which is located along State Route 125. It's located south of the Burnside neighborhood. The red star indicates the proposed entrance into the facility. Upon entering the facility, you would come through an area that has been identified as commercial parcels for development of commercial activities in support of the activities that would occur on the property. The access road then would continue through that area to the visitor center, and from the visitor center there would be short-term parking for those who need to go in and do business in the office, and then you would proceed to the day-use parking area from that point forward. And then extending further into the site, past the day-use parking area for the motorized activity, one enters into the non-motorized trailhead, which would be separated from the motorized uses. This would be for equestrians, hikers, mountain bikers, hunting access, and also provide a non-motorized campground in that vicinity that would lead you and connect you to the non-motorized trails that also extend around the Eastern Reserve. There we go. Then extending back further into the Eastern Reserve property, we have the yellow line on the map represents what is intended to be a primary access route, which would mean that basically a street vehicle could come in and enter into the site. This would provide access for emergency responders, for safety and security personnel, for maintenance personnel to get into close proximity of the areas that might be more difficult to reach. The purple trails represent a network of non-motorized trails, hiking, biking, equestrian uses. Also within the Eastern Reserve, we have proposed some motorized trails. The number of crossings are limited for obvious reasons between crossing motorized trails, crossing non-motorized uses, but the Eastern Reserve is really intended for a low-density, low-intensity motorized use, and the western portion of the site is where we have the higher density and the more intense trail facilities being proposed. I did mention on the trail, the first slide, the trail access. At the last public meeting, there was a question about the potential to provide a buffer for the Burnside neighborhood. That comment was again addressed in the planning process. There's a buffer that is proposed on the northern side of the Burnside properties to provide them with some peace from the motorized activities that might be occurring on the Eastern Reserve property. Likewise, we have the Excelsior buffer on the Eastern Reserve properties. From there, we head south into East Cameron Township, and this is really the access and the hillside that the county owns on along State Route 2044. I believe that's High Road. And there we've proposed a secondary access point coming down, following the old bed that goes along the hillside, along the mountainside, that comes down into through the Helfenstein neighborhood, and then eventually connects to State Route 2044. Also in this area, there is the proposal by a wind energy company to come in and develop wind turbine facilities to generate wind energy. And those are represented by the blue circles that are shown on this map. The darker green area that you see in this slide represents that this is a buffer area. It is meant for limited motorized access, really safety, security, primarily emergency response use. Also provides secondary access to the site for the hiking, equestrian, and hunters that may want to access the hillside. Now we cross over 125 and we get to what we refer to as the Western Reserve. And at the Western Reserve, we would come through, the county needs to obtain access easements through several properties to reach the property that they own that would come in near the proximity of the whaleback. I think most folks are familiar with the whaleback as a geological feature. It's not on county property, it's held by another entity, but the yellow access road comes in on the county property just south of the whaleback area. As we come into the property along the whaleback again, this is meant to be a primary access road for street vehicles. The yellow loop that takes us into the property, down over Carbon Run to the projects and over to Hart Lake, and then loops back to provide a continuous loop throughout the bowl and Western Reserve, again, is meant for the access into the site. We also have secondary access points that would come out. One comes out on the south of the flats and there's a gate proposed there, but again, that would be emergency services only. You have to enter through property held by another entity to come in through that gate, so that would be emergency response only, as well as coming through the access point by Heart Lake. There's a gate down at Heart Lake that provides emergency access and emergency response opportunity into the property. But this is the Mahanoy Mountain, the Bowl, Bear Valley, and then Big Mountain as we head over to Trevorton. And in this area, it's really designed to be the higher density of motorized trail activities. We're looking at everything from cruising trails to the rock crawling trails that might be a mile in length but take all day to negotiate. You'll notice that we have a buffer again along the south side, along High Road, State Route 2044. Again, that's to provide a buffer to the neighbors, to be a good neighbor to the residents to the south, as well as providing a very significant buffer along Carbon Run. From an environmental perspective, motorized uses create dust, and we want to provide sufficient vegetative filters to filter that material out before we reach the water courses that feed into Carbon Run. Then heading north of Carbon Run, we get to the Heart Lake area. We've proposed several camping areas, one by the projects, one potentially over by Heart Lake, and then those are the camping areas on the Western Reserve. And then we get to the north along Trevorton on Big Mountain, in the slope on Big Mountain. We're proposing an access point where the county property continues down to Cole Street. That would be a secondary entrance, potentially for motorized use. However, that would require the townships to come to the county and request that access. The county is not going to promote that. They're not going to take that on. They want the county and really the local residents to be in support of that to make that happen. We also have a few play areas in the Western Reserve. We have the sand pit area, we have the Pines area, and a number of other locations on the Western Reserve for those kinds of activities. Heading further to the west, what I refer to as the far west, there's some property that extends across the state route that has a few trails on it today, has some really good rock crawling opportunities now. It's not connected to the trail system within the park, and so this might become a special use area for events or what have you, but wouldn't be a general day-to-day riding area because of the state highway that separates it from the property. The buffer along Trevorton is designed to mitigate the impact of the activities at the AOAA on the Trevorton neighborhood. We've read and we've heard many times about some of the issues that are occurring on surrounding property, and we want this facility to be a good neighbor and to promote that responsibility with the community. And so that's the reason for a large buffer area with, again, limited access for motorized use. In terms of the overall trail mileage, we're looking at about approximately 318 miles of trail property. About 50 of those miles are non-motorized uses, the equestrian, the hiking, the mountain biking. The remainder of those trails are for the full-size vehicles, the ATVs, the side-by-sides, and the MX motorcycles. And in addition to that, there is approximately 27 miles of access road throughout the property. In terms of the motorized trail mileage, specifically we have 65 miles that would be open to full-size use. We have 100 miles that would be open to side-by-side and ATV use. And we have 77 miles that would be open to the off-highway motorcycle, the MX use. And again, this is just scratching the surface. This is really primarily working with the existing trail network that we have out there. There are many opportunities to develop parallel trails for ATVs and side-by-sides and off-highway motorcycles that would parallel some of the existing full-size vehicle trails that go through there now, and just create a world-class facility for motorized riding. In terms of the trail mileage, it breaks down as follows. The top pie chart, about 41% of the trails would be open to ATV use. 27% of the trails would be open for full-size use, and about 32% of the trails would be open for the off-highway motorcycle use. In terms of land use, and this is a very important issue, what we did is we looked at the areas that the trails go through and estimated how much of the land is non-motorized, how much of the land use is motorized, and how much of the land is being preserved for buffers. And looking at it from that perspective, we ended up with about pretty much an equal mix on that, about 33% for each type of activity. So 33% of the 6,000 plus acres is open to motorized use. We have about 33% of land being open to non-motorized use and limited motorized use. And then we have 33% of the property being included in the buffer areas to be good neighbors, both to the residents and to the natural resources that we have on the property. With that, we get into our master plan estimates the cost for the development of the property, and right now the focus is on phase one. Our recommendations for phase one development are to complete the necessary boundary surveys to establish the locations of the properties, to bring in the primary access road from State Route 125, develop the short-term parking and the day-use parking areas, construct a building that we can operate out of from day one that would serve the maintenance, safety, security, and the park operations. We would need to bring the utilities to it, provide electric, phone, and water. And then a significant part of the process is that the Department of Environmental Protection will require that we formalize the trails by securing environmental permits for the use of the trails. Then finally, the last recommendation in phase one is also to develop a non-motorized trailhead facility to begin that development. We've said from the very beginning that we wanted to serve both the motorized and the non-motorized community, and the commitment in phase one is to get the non-motorized community access into the property as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Bob Good, who's going to discuss the recommendations for the business plan.
As we go through all of the information about the master plan tonight, that includes the things that John's just talked about and the business plan now, you need to understand that there's lots and lots of information that we aren't able to share with you tonight. That simply we're trying to provide an overview of the 300 and some pages that are in the report without boring you with all the detail of the analysis and such that went into all of it. And so if you have questions or want more information on any of the topics that we talked about tonight, I would encourage you to get on anthraciteadventure.com and download the report, and you can look at the whole thing and find out all the detail about how we came to the conclusions that we did and what the background information is on all of it. I'm going to talk for a little bit now about the business plan, and the business plan, kind of the topics that I'm going to talk about are the organizational structure. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about rules and regulations, safety and security, financial objectives and pricing strategies, and then close it out looking at economic impact. And when we first started looking at how the organizational structure of this site ought to occur, we narrowed it down to really three choices for us. And the management models that we considered were, first of all, where the property would be county-owned and county-operated. That is, Northumberland County, who owns the property now, would continue to own it, and they would also operate it. What we heard from an awful lot of the residents of the county was that it wasn't a good idea for this kind of a project to be the burden of the county operation, to be a department of the county, or to be operated by an existing department of the county, that there was that the residents don't want this to become a financial burden to the county and in return to be a tax burden to the taxpayers. And so because of that, we eliminated that model very quickly. The second one that we looked at also continues with the property being owned by the county, but being leased in operations to a nonprofit or a private organization. And we looked pretty seriously at this because we thought there may be some good value in doing it this way. And as we looked further and considered and talked with other folks who have interest in operating these kinds of facilities on a private basis, what we found was with the environmental concerns, with the natural resource extraction that the county still needs to maintain, with a number of limitations that need to be put on it in any kind of a lease that would go out to a private or nonprofit entity, that it just wasn't going to be attractive to do that with an outside agency. So the third option that we looked at then was county-owned and operated by a municipal authority. And that's the recommendation that we've come back to. The advantages to doing it in that fashion are that the county still owns the property. The county creates the authority as a separate entity to manage and operate it. They appoint folks to the authority that know something about operation of the business and about OHV facilities and managing that sort of thing. And it becomes a cooperative effort between the county and their own agency about coordinating back and forth on managing the natural resources and the resource extraction and the other things that really need to be a part of continued operation of the plant. And so by doing that, the county's responsibility, and summary of the county's responsibility, are that they would retain ownership, that they would still carry out all the matters to which they're legally bound on the property, that they would create and appoint the authority board, and that they would manage and operate all non-recreation aspects of the property. And those non-recreation aspects include the things that I've been talking about with the natural resource extraction, with the potential for wind energy, with the roads, and all of those kinds of things that occur on the property. The authority, on the other hand, would be a municipal authority. They would have the financial, functional, and program responsibilities for all of the recreational aspects of the property, and that would include both motorized and non-motorized activities. And they would as well manage the proposed commercial area that's right at the entrance to the facility, as that commercial area really is intended to be a spin-off of the recreational use of the property. And so that's the direction that we're moving ahead with in terms of recommendation for the organizational structure. We also looked at three different kinds of business models as we looked at the property and ways to operate the business that happens out there. So the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area Municipal Authority would look to one of these business models under which to operate. And so the first one we looked at was private business, and there are lots of private businesses operating all across the state as well as around the country. Rouse Creek, which is just down the road, Mountain Ridge Trail Resort in Somerset, Pennsylvania, the Badlands Off-Road, which used to be Paragon, which was here in the eastern part of the state, and when they closed down, moved to Indiana and kind of opened up again. Coal Creek, off-highway vehicle area, and there are dozens and dozens of others across the Commonwealth. Once again, because of the difficulty in leasing back or leasing a property to a private business, we felt that there was value in that model, because the private business model is such that you operate, your revenues have to exceed expenditures or you can't continue to operate. And so we tried to pull the good things out of that model that we wanted to emulate and include them in the end in the business model that we would use. The second model we looked at was a government facility, and we also see those kinds of facilities all across the country. Almost an awful lot of states in the U.S. operate their own kinds of facilities, either on a state basis or a county basis or a municipal basis. And the advantages to those things are that the role of the municipal government is that they're really looking out for the interests of the residents to which they're serving. And so there are some good opportunities to using some of the governmental facility business practices that include the opportunity to apply for grants and that kind of funding. The other way that the other business model we looked at was as a club operator, where clubs simply go in and purchase a property, and they get together as a group of people and they create their own organization and they operate the property. And the advantages to that kind of a business model is that there are lots and lots of people that are ready and willing to come out and help on the property because they have ownership in it, and they're willing to put their efforts into it to secure the property, to build the trails, to maintain the trails, to help with security issues, all of those kinds of things. And so as we looked at this, what we realized very quickly was that we needed portions of all three of those business models. And so the business model that we present tonight is really a hybrid that looks at the components of the governmental entity, or draws on components from all three, and the governmental entity on drawing on those opportunities to apply for grant funding that the state and other organizations have available, and being able to coordinate and cooperate back and forth with the county government, while at the same time using business principles to talk about bottom line and cash flow and revenue over expenses, and marketing opportunities and the things that typically aren't a part of some of the other kinds of business models. And then finally, in looking at the club operations, with the number of folks that have come forward already from all kinds of clubs and businesses and interests, we believe that there's a lot of opportunity to use the volunteers on this property to take advantage of the in-kind services that volunteers are willing to provide. And so this business model ends up being a hybrid of all three of the models that we looked at, and we think can be a very successful business model. I'm going to take you through just a couple of operations things then. You know, we've gotten the question over and over again about why do we need to have rules out there? Why this list of rules that we all have to abide by as we go on the property? And I guess the real answer is, if you don't have the rules, the slides that Pat showed at the beginning of the session here, that's what you end up with. You end up with property that isn't well managed, that people can do whatever they want, and so there's no responsible recreation taking place on the property. And as this is developed into a good site, there needs to be standards that are set to provide responsible recreation for everybody that comes there. We also need to look at providing for the health and safety and welfare of all the visitors that come onto the site. And even though some individuals may not want to do some of the things that the rules and regulations require, there are lots and lots of folks that are affected when the rules aren't followed. And so as we look to protect the health and safety and welfare of visitors, there really needs to be the standards set for use of the facility. It also helps to reduce liability, and that's a very key issue. And then of course we need to work to abide by the laws of the Commonwealth and the local municipalities. And we went through in detail at our last meeting the rules and regulations that were proposed, and the rules and regulations are an ongoing discussion as we move ahead with it, and we have made some recommendations for how they take place. The second kind of operating procedure that's been kind of a hot button for us that we've tried to deal with, and even on our own study committee, had many discussions on the proposed hunting policy and how we should accommodate hunters, the local people in the hunting opportunities out there. And the recommendation that we've ended up with is that the park would be closed to ATV use or OHV use and other uses during a particular season except on Sundays. And so that means that it would be open for hunting exclusively from what would be the Saturday before Thanksgiving, which at least in this year was the first day of bear season, and would stay closed to OHV use and open to hunters through about the second week of January. And as we've looked at the opportunities for that, that really covers portions of nearly every single season for hunting. The other thing is that is in addition to keeping open all year round within the Game Commission regulations between 300 and 400 acres of the enterprise property that's already out there. That's was known as the Alaska site, and that will continue to be open all the time, just governed by the regulations of the PA Game Commission. And we know that from a hunting perspective that isn't going to satisfy all of the hunters, and we're trying to find some balance there, and so that's the recommendation that has been made to the county. When we talk about safety and security, we've really identified 4 basic objectives that we feel like we need to deal with on the property. Safeguarding people and possessions, we want to make sure in our safety and security that the folks that come out to use the property are safe and secure, and the things that they bring there are taken care of. We want to look to protect adjacent property owners from the hazards and nuisances that result from use of OHVs on the property. And we realize that that's going to be a significant issue, and at the same time preventing undesired access. You know, when we work on these kinds of facilities, just by virtue of the name itself, all-terrain vehicle in an ATV, they're intended to go anywhere they want to go. Off-highway vehicles are intended to be able to go where they want to go off-highway, and the challenge is that when you put something in front of them, they want to climb over it, go around it, go under it, go through it, and find a way to go. And so we understand that those are going to be significant issues for us. And we have addressed in a number of ways some methods of dealing with those things, understanding that it's going to take time and take a process of getting people used to it. But we really believe that as time goes by, that people start to understand that if they really want this OHV facility to be there and to be open, that they've got to abide by the standards that we've set. And so, you know, some of the things that we'll be doing, or some of the possibilities that we'll be looking at for managing access both on and off the property include electronic sensors and that would be able to control that access, include barricades, include videos, a whole host of things. And one of the big things really is education. I mean, it's our intention as people come in to provide them with a map and show the boundaries of the property and tell them, you know, this is where you need to stay, and we'll have signage at the boundaries as we can. And then also in safety and security, we need to work on enforcing the laws of the Commonwealth and the local municipalities, and we'll be dealing with the local state law enforcement agencies to do that. The resources that we feel that need to be provided for the safety and security include security staffing, and there will be an AOAA safety director assigned even in the early phases of this. That position probably won't be a standalone position in the early days of operation, but combined with probably with the manager or director's position. But at some point in the years shortly after that, that'll be a significant enough position that it'll become a standalone. We intend to use a volunteer safety patrol that'll be out there regularly, be trained, understand the ways to do things, have communication back to the main office. We have the potential to contract with local or state police to use paid security and rangers on the site during peak events. So we are looking pretty seriously at how we have people on the ground to manage security. In terms of communication, this is one of the big things. There needs to be a unified communication system that allows all EMS and law enforcement agencies to talk together among each other and to be able to communicate directly with the AOAA management and staff. And that's not the case at this point. Many of the departments can only talk among themselves. Very few of them have the ability to talk to one another. And so that's a system that needs to come through the enhanced 911 in the county, and we're promoting that would be critical to this. We've already talked about the fact that there are emergency landing accesses and emergency accesses for vehicles, and John showed those to you on the master site plan. We also want to look to working with emergency service providers and enforcement to make sure that they have the kinds of vehicles and the kinds of equipment that they need to get on the property and to be able to handle folks when they're in there. And that's not to say that AOAA is going to provide those things, but we want to be able to work and look to how we can acquire grants and find the kinds of things that those organizations need to have. And some of the emergency providers already have some of the equipment and vehicles that we identified. So now we talk about the big stuff, the finances. We really have, as we look at the finances, we really have 8 financial objectives. The first of them is to provide a world-class OHV facility. And that may not sound like a financial objective as you first look at it, but the real plan here is to have a place that people want to come to, and that people are ready and willing to come to, and come back over and over and over again. And to do that, we need to have a first-class place. We want to maintain a fee structure that is reasonable for local residents, that's attractive to riders nationwide, and that's adequate to pay the bills. We think that's pretty simple and straightforward, and we've listened to the residents here to know that that's really where we want to go with it. We need to be able to produce revenues in excess of expenses. We need to utilize multiple sources of revenue. We need to grow the operations and facilities only as finances permit, and I think that's something that's critical. And again, I just addressed that's one of the things that people have asked over and over again. The intention is that the facility will grow and be developed as grant funding is available from both public and private sources, and as revenues are produced on the site to be able to match those funds. And we want to ensure long-term sustainability. This isn't a plan that's put together that we expect to last 4 years and be done. We want to promote a business plan that really looks to the long term in the future. We need to, if we're going to be sustainable long term, we need to anticipate market fluctuations. We realize that markets change and the economy changes, and so we need to be prepared for that. And we want to support the communities that surround the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure area through the economic impact of the site. And I think if there were two things that we would talk about that show success for this operation, it would be that it's financially successful year after year after year. That is, the revenues exceed expenses, and that it has a significant economic impact on the surrounding areas. That is, that there's money being spent in the areas, in the communities in which you live, and come from to ride. And so when we look at the financials then, and finally ended up with our pricing to market strategies, and I can tell you that I looked at dozens and dozens of plans from all kinds of organizations across the country to try and come up with the appropriate pricing strategy for what I believe needs to happen at this. And we've had some good discussions with the committee, and really think that this is probably the best option. There is still some room for some flexibility in this. And our goal really is, the primary goal has been, and this comes from you residents and from our committee, is to keep cost of local admission affordable to the local people. And so our one-day passes are $25, two-day passes are $40. But I want to very quickly go over that, because for the local residents, we don't think those are the things that make the difference. You folks aren't coming out for 1 day or 2 days. You can buy an annual pass for $80, and if you buy an annual pass for $80, which is very reasonable in the area, even if you look across the Commonwealth, that's a very reasonable fee in comparison to most of the other facilities across the Commonwealth. If you spend your $80 and ride 7 times on the property, it's going to cost you $11.48 to ride each time. If you ride 14 times, it'll be $5.72 per ride. If you ride 21 times, it's down below $4. If you ride 80 times, it's $1 a time to be out there. So by the time you're riding 28 times, you're paying less than the price of a gallon of gas to be on the property when you go out there. And that was really designed specifically for the local residents, so that we can meet your needs for pricing. Now, we expect and would encourage non-residents to buy the $80 pass too, because we'd like to see them coming back if they'd like to over and over again. But we really expect that oftentimes the out-of-towners or the non-local people are going to pay the day pass or the 2-day pass to come in for a weekend. But we'll take their $80 if they want to pay it to come in for longer than that. So that's the pricing strategy, and based on that pricing strategy, the financial analysis and the business plan shows that with that kind of a model, that we need to obviously bring in more people on a regular basis than we do if we had the higher fees. But we think that with a first-class facility and that kind of pricing model, that we're going to be able to bring the people that we need to provide revenue over expenses year after year. Our major sources of operating revenue are going to be the admission fees, and that's the passes that we just talked about. There's lots of opportunity for other sources of revenue, including sponsor fees, advertising. We will operate some concessions on site. You need to understand that concessions on site are not intended to compete specifically with the local businesses, but to provide for the things that people need when they're on the site that they aren't going to get up and go and ride in town to find. Things like drinks and snacks and the immediate equipment when you lose a glove or you break a shield and a helmet, or those kinds of things. And those are the things that will be provided there. There are lots of special events that can be operated as well. And So our estimate is that in the first year of operation based on about 6,000 passes being sold, that we're going to end up with about $238,000 in revenue in the first full year of operation. And that $238,000 will be sufficient to cover expenses. And really, if you look at the full business plan, we propose that that the facility is completely 100% break even by the 5th year, and that in the interim, in those first 5 years, that there will be that the authority would borrow an operating loan of about $80,000 that would carry them through those first years, and that money is paid back as part of the annual expenses each year, year after year. Anticipated sources of revenue for development then are DCNR grants, and the AOA has already received about $600,000 in grants, or have committed that in the first 2 revenue sources from DCNR. There are other government grants, and again, there have already been a number of those that have been committed. DCD has already committed $40,000 as part of the project. The Appalachian Regional Commission has committed some money, or at least is considering some. The DCD, through the Bureau of Mine Reclamation, is planning to provide funds as well. So there are certainly other government funds that are available out there, and the county at this point has done a real nice job of accessing those grants. There's private funding through Yamaha and that we already received a grant from. Through Polaris has already provided a grant, and there are lots of those kinds of organizations and businesses that are ready and willing to contribute to all kinds of things, from signage to trail development to safety and security, to all of those kinds of things. We propose a 501c3 nonprofit as a friends organization that opens up another whole arena of funding possibilities through foundations and contributions that can't be made to governmental agencies. And then finally, through revenue production in the operations. Now, a lot of people have asked, well, what makes you think that this place can even be successful financially? And I guess in our experience, and we've done a number of these plans now, and we look around the Commonwealth and across the country and see all kinds of demonstrated successes, even ones that are right here in central eastern Pennsylvania, with Roush Creek, which is down the street, which has been highly successful in theirs, and they just keep going year after year after year, and so they've had a successful operation. Paragon, which was successful in eastern Pennsylvania for quite a number of years, and only left because of a land issue with the property owner, moved from Pennsylvania and went to Indiana, and are now open and operating a successful operation called Badlands out in Indiana. Hatfield McCoy Trails has been successful. Black Mountain, and I'll talk to you about a couple of those as we look ahead in a few minutes. I indicated to you that that part of the success is not just the bottom line for us, it's looking at the economic development. And Bloomsburg University has made a commitment to the county to continue to analyze and understand the economic impact of this facility from the day that it opens. And in fact, my understanding is that they've received a grant and are prepared to start this fall in gathering information and then to start to track economic development as it takes place. And I have to tell you, from our experience of being in the community for the last a little over a year now with working on this project, there are, I'm not sure the number, at least a half a dozen, maybe more than that, of businesses that have already opened or already committed to open because of the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area. We also have received over 60 unsolicited offers to date from all kinds of groups and organizations that include some major businesses like Geisinger Medical Center that's already provided funds for safety training and been on the site and already held some of those on site. Bloomsburg University I talked about. Susquehanna River Valley Visitor Bureau really is interested in how this thing gets promoted, and they've committed to, and you can see the list of, and that's just a partial list because, like I say, there are about 60 of them. I want to talk to you just quickly about a couple of case studies. And I know that some of you know about the Hatfield-McCoy Trail, but I think I really want to show you what the defined impact of that has been on the communities there. In the 2006 Economic Impact Study shows that in the first 2 years of operation of the Hatfield-McCoy Trail, and that was when they were at their smallest, before they grew and developed into what they are now, that total resale sales grew by over 12%. That local payroll increased by $104 million in those surrounding communities. That gains in sales and payroll were seen in all related aspects and sectors, including gas stations, accommodations, food service, real estate sales, and rentals, and that they produced an estimated $660,000 of additional tax revenue. And that's in their first 2 years of operation. We see no reason why the same thing can't happen here. The Hatfield-McCoy in their 2011 brochure now shows 26 local lodging accommodations along their trails. And that includes hotels, motels, lodges, rental homes, campgrounds, all those sorts of things. They show 3 ATV motorcycle dealerships, 5 ATV rental facilities, in addition to a whole host of restaurants and convenience stores and all kinds of those kind of agencies that support the facility. And so all that money is being spent in the county. Or in the region there. The second one is the Black Mountain Off-Road Adventure Area, which is in Harlan County, Kentucky. And this one speaks more to the operations than to the economic impact, although you'll see in a minute that their economic impact is significant as well. If you look at the slide up there and you see the state in the red, this is Kentucky, and they analyzed in 6 months in 2009 where their folks were coming from, and they had visitors from 31 states and Canada, and they're all color coded up there about where the most people came from. Harlan County, Kentucky, the site is 6,000 acres. It's ATV, OHV. It's in a small community, an area of small communities, so it's all very similar to the site that we're talking about here. The park's website for this, which is, I believe, their 3rd year of operation, 2011, includes 21 events that are scheduled that include a whole host of kinds of activities, including theme festivals and rides and regional crawling events and nationwide events as well. They also provide opportunities for hiking, horseback riding, canoeing, kayaking, fishing, hunting, and their financial statements show in their 2010 annual report that they were financially successful in their 2nd year of operation. In terms of the economic impact of Harts, Kentucky, which is the home Black Mountain Outdoor Adventure Area, they say has become the birthplace of adventure tourism because of the numbers of people that they're drawing in there and the impact that it's having on their communities. The Hatfield-McCoy Trail System is, in their literature from the state, says that it is and will continue to become an important component of the economic development of West Virginia and of the southern part of the state. It'll be a catalyst for future development and expansion. As tourism grows, it will bring increased visibility to the region, as well as its attractiveness for the local and other types of business. And we see no reason why the Northumberland County area can't capitalize on those things. And we've, working with the committee, proposed really a vision for the future of economic impact or economic development. And there are 4 components to that. One is that the communities would be uniquely branded. That is that they would use the branding of the outdoor adventure area to start to draw people into their businesses so that they can effectively promote patronage and tourism in the area, that the businesses would adapt to this tourist market that's coming in and accommodate to their unique vehicle needs and the personal needs that they have, that the region would offer a full range of businesses that's going to grow from where it is now, and finally that there would be leadership and volunteers that would be organized and motivated to successfully implement those kinds of strategies. Our analysis from the economists that we hired to work with us as part of this shows that the economic impact of this facility in what we propose is the 5th year, when we would hit about 40,000 people, that total personal income in that year would be increased by almost $3.3 million. That what we classify as total value added income, and that is personal income as well as profits and municipal taxes that are paid, would total $5.2 million. That's all new income into the region, and that as many as 184 new jobs would be produced. And so I think that as we look at that and look to the future, I think we really believe that this is a huge opportunity for the county in this area, and that it can be financially beneficial to everyone.
Thank you, Bob. So in closing the formal presentation, we really believe that we were able to develop a plan that achieves the county goals while meeting the needs of the county's residents, that the plan results in recommendations to accommodate all, and that the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure area will continuously evolve. The facilities, the activity areas, the policies will be reviewed. They can be modified over time to respond to the conditions, demands, and needs presented at the facility. With that, we'd like to enter into our question and answer period. At the first two meetings, we said we're not here to answer questions. We're here to receive your questions and receive your comments so that we can come back and respond to them at the final meeting. And so we hope we answered a lot of questions throughout the presentation. If we haven't answered your questions, we'll form lines like we have in the past, and you can ask those questions. But before you do that, I'd like to establish the ground rules. These are the same ground rules that we had in previous meetings. First of all, please respect the opinion of the person that is speaking. You don't have to agree with their question or their comment, but we're not here to debate the issues tonight. We're here to take input. If you're here with a group, please, and I really stress this, have a spokesperson speak for your group. We don't need 14 people from a particular group to come up and say we're in support or we oppose. Just state the name of your organization, who you represent, and your question about the project. We'd like you to remain quiet while the person is speaking at the microphone, and we'd like to have you keep your statements as clear and concise as possible so that we can get through this as quick as possible and give everyone the opportunity to speak. Please only ask one question. If you'd like to ask a second question, you may do so after everybody has had the opportunity to ask. And finally, you have 2 minutes to speak, and we will have a countdown slide that will warn you when there's a minute left, when there's 30 seconds left, when there's 10 seconds left. At the end of those 2 minutes, we will, if you've asked a question, we will respond, and then we'll move on to the next person. So with that, if we could form 2 lines, one to the left and one to the right, and we'll prepare for this. Is your microphone?
Anybody want to speak?
Is your microphone on, Bob?
Yes. It is.
Okay. For those interested in speaking, please come on down to the aisles.
Yeah, I have a comment. You mentioned in the beginning about a county municipal authority. I just wonder who's going to be responsible for salaries, for benefits, things like that. Is that going to be the sole burden of the park, or is that going to be more of a burden for the taxpayers?
The question was how will the staff in the authority be paid? Would that be the responsibility of the authority, or would it be the burden of the taxpayers? And the answer is that it'll come from revenues produced at the site and shouldn't come back on to the county as an authority. The authority is completely separate in its business practices, and so they would be responsible for paying staff.
Yes, I saw that you did give some estimates of revenue, but nowhere did I see anything about estimates of what the expenses are. Do you have any pro forma income statements or anything that will tell us first year and beyond what the expenses should be?
The question is, we showed revenue, we showed anticipated revenue in the first year, we didn't show any on expenses. Is there a pro forma that shows that? And the answer is yes. If you get onto the website and look at the document, there's a 5-year pro forma that shows revenue and expenses, and it shows the tracking of what I described as the 5 years to break even, and it's done in really fairly significant detail in the pro forma. It'd be helpful if you think you want to talk to come up and get in line instead of waiting for.
Hello, Chris Capola with Geisinger Medical Center. I wanted to say that it's been an honor to be involved in some of the planning features for future safety of the park. And to briefly review what Geisinger is hoping to do as the park grows, is that first and foremost we'll continue to take care of whoever is injured, adults or children, whatever we can do in that capacity. I think partnering with the park to try to determine entrance